Well, you can't talk about Monte Sereno and the history of Monte Sereno without talking about the Billy Jones Wildcat Railroad. And sadly, we don't have Billy Jones here to talk about it with, but we have this guy who is a historian of all historians, Ken Middlebrook. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Lisa.
And
How
the
you doing?
hat.
Yeah, well,
The hat makes the outfit.
that's part of history. You know, it's dirty. That shows age.
I like
Patina.
that. Well, and I'm feeling old too because I grew up on this railroad. Now you can kind of figure out my age because it came to Visona Park in 1968.
We opened here July 26, 1970. So 68 is when Billy passed away in January. And it took about 2 years for the community to raise up the funds and move all the equipment down from Dave's Avenue down here to the park.
Dave's Avenue, right in the heart of Monte Sereno.
Yes.
Yes. And back then it was Monte Sereno.
It was, right.
Yes.
As you know, it's right there off of Winchester, but Monte Sereno. Yes.
Yes, in fact, Winchester and Monte Sereno, isn't there a plaque for the Billy Jones Railroad?
Yes, there's a plaque where the railroad sat. Billy owned 10 acres there of that property. And when the railroads moved down here to the park, there were about 8 homes that were built at that location, or 9 homes. And when they built the sound wall there, that's when the town installed that plaque.
Good for the town.
Yes.
I know, I'm all about memories, and especially important ones like this. Well, where do we start? I think we should start at the beginning. Billy Jones, you must know all about him. I'm so sad that I never had the chance to meet him because what a fun-loving guy he was.
He was truly just a terrific human being. He really loved the community. He loved the town that he grew up in Ben Lomond.
Yes.
He worked for what's called the South Pacific Narrow Gauge. That was the narrow gauge train that ran from Alameda to Santa Cruz, up and over the hill. And so he worked there on a train as an engineer with that railroad in the late 19th century.
So do you go to school to become an engineer, or is it learn on the job?
It's pretty much learn on the job. These steam locomotives, it's basically, we're talking about technology that's 200 years old.
Oh.
And so, it's technology that it is learn on the job, that you learn the feel and you use all your senses. The sound, the feel, the look of your fire, the smoke, and it's just it's like just another living being, steam locomotive.
Yes,
They come to life when you bring them up from cold to full operating temperature. It's like bringing something into life. You feel like Dr. Frankenstein at times. Like it's alive.
I think I might be talking to Billy Jones reincarnated right now.
No, Billy worked for the South Pacific Narrow Gauge, and that was bought out by Southern Pacific.
Yes.
And so he became a mainline steam engineer between San Francisco and San Luis Obispo.
Wow.
And he was actually running what's called the daylight passenger train. That was the cracked train between San Francisco and Los Angeles. San Luis Obispo was the halfway point. And so he was running that northern half. And so while he was working there on the railroad in about 1939, during one of his stopovers in San Francisco, he found this old decrepit locomotive in a scrapyard getting ready to be shipped overseas for scrapping.
And that was the start of it,
That was the start of it.
Oh, my
That was
goodness.
the number 2 that we have here at the railroad.
Isn't that
And
something?
it's just a beautiful locomotive. And Billy, because of his knowledge and also his friendships of people working at Southern Pacific, he was able to get tools and knowledge to help rebuild the locomotive there to run on his property.
So, okay, so that was the first on his 10 acres of ranch
10
land.
acres, and so that was...
Was he married at that point?
Yes, he was married to his wife.
And Mrs. Jones had 4 children with Mr. Jones.
Yes, they had 2 boys and 2 girls.
And they grew up in Monte Sereno.
Grew up in Monte Sereno.
At Dave's and Winchester.
And Dave's Avenue, and their 2 sons, both sons joined the military for the war effort.
World War II.
And sadly, both sons were killed in action.
Were they fighting together? Do you know?
No, they were not fighting together. They were in 2, but they got both
separate deaths.
And so
had to destroy Billy and his wife.
And that was one thing that with his railroad is that he had this locomotive. It's like he's going to rebuild this railroad on his property in memory of his 2 sons. That way, the children can enjoy.
Oh.
And so
And he had the two daughters.
And he had the two daughters, and so he opened the railroad in 1943. He had a little loop
At
of
his
track
house?
at his house. Yeah, basically imagine running this train in your backyard, right?
And how long would it take for the train to go around the tracks? Do you know?
So I never rode it myself, but I see anywhere from like 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, it was a rather quick trip.
And
so
all the neighborhood kids
all
would
the
come?
neighborhood kids, and he would run the train on Sundays, and just he would have a sign that he put out on Winchester that said train ride Sunday, and people from around the community, not just Monte Sereno, but Los Gatos, Saratoga, and even San Jose,
Sure.
would come on Sundays after services and ride the train for free.
For free?
Because Billy, the enjoyment that he had with working people was like he wanted to share his hobby and his love for steam trains with the community.
And Monte Sereno, what did they think about all this? Did they think it was wonderful? Were the neighbors complaining about the train whistles and the noise and the people?
Well, you would have people that would complain.
Sure.
That's unfortunate, but the vast majority of people loved it because
Of
this
course.
is something that who doesn't like a train? You hear
And-
that whistle,
and
you hear the
kids
bell,
laughing.
and that's the whole thing
Oh.
about why we enjoy it still here at the park, and that's one of the memories that we try and keep alive with the public is just the enjoyment that people have. Seeing people lighten up, and the kids, when they hear that whistle, you can't get them away from the train because they love it.
And sometimes on weekends, I can hear it from my house. I live over by Los Gatos Lodge, and sometimes I hear the train whistle on a Sunday afternoon. I get all excited.
That's one nice thing about where we're located here. Now, getting at the mouth of Los Gatos Canyon is you hear the echoes coming off the hillsides.
It's great.
Just beautiful.
It really is.
And
One of the many things we
right,
love.
yes.
So now, Walt Disney, he had an amazing friendship with Walt Disney. Do you know how that started?
Well, Walt Disney was an avid train buff. He loved trains, and so
More than Mickey?
more than Mickey, more than dumb. No.
Yeah, let's not go too far.
But anyway, certainly in the late 40s, early 50s, people knew of Billy Jones in terms of his backyard railroad operation.
bet.
And so Walt Disney heard of the stories. Walt Disney, of course, being down there in Southern California, heard the story of this man running trains in his backyard. And Walt at that time, in the late 40s, was really having the idea of doing something beyond just films and cartoons. So Walt came up here, and through several visits, they become close friends. Close friends, here's a little tidbit that we need to know, is that on opening day of Disneyland in 1955, Billy was one of the engineers running around Disneyland on the opening day on the steam trains that Walt had built at that point.
We're out in the sunshine, but I have goosebumps. That is such a great little piece of trivia.
It's just a
Well,
part of history.
And it's a
that's all.
great part of history. Now, I did read one time that Walt came here to visit, and nobody knew he was coming, but maybe the media knew, because all of a sudden there was all this excitement and an
Right.
entourage. I mean, it's Walt Disney, and there he was in his overalls, like you,
Right.
visiting Billy Jones, and then the word got out even bigger
Right.
than what was going on.
Well, for Walt Disney had a lot of stress in his life, and actually used the trains, his hobby of railroading, to kind of relax his personal. And so that's why he tried to keep things low key in terms of when he visited, certainly up here in Northern California, because he didn't want the publicity. He wanted to be able to be himself, and so that's why he would try and come up here by with just his wife, and because the two couples, they would entertain each other and stuff. And so
I can't imagine. Can you imagine? Having Walt Disney over for dinner. Oh my goodness.
But that's how they were just small, and that's kind of Walt's background of growing up in I believe it's Missouri. He came from a small town, and so coming to Billy's property, that was kind of like a return to his childhood.
Well,
and of course, having a steam train, that helps everything.
And I would think you come into what's now Monte Sereno, this idyllic little town, not that big, not that many people. It was what Walt was probably longing for.
Absolutely.
I mean, oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
exactly.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Now, I did hear there was a tip jar that Billy Jones did keep if people wanted to give tips. And I heard once that Walt Disney would double the money when he came.
Yeah, so what Billy never charged any
real
money
rates,
for riding his train. What he did, he just had a great big pickle jar, out there at the edge of the station, and to allow anybody to, and what people would do, they would drop whatever they want in there, and Billy wouldn't take that for himself. He would use that money for charity events, or if there was a child that needed some medical attention down at Valley Medical, that mysteriously a donation would be made toward that individual or cause. And you're right, when Walt was in town, Walt would look at the jar and double what was in there just to help because once again, the generosity that Billy exuded, that's something that everybody felt about the man.
But do you know anything about his personality? Was like you, just full of life and full of energy and just full of love?
I never had the opportunity to meet the man, but that's what I understand from all the people who met him personally and knew him through the years, and that's why I think the community, upon Billy's passing in January 1968, I think that's really what resonated within the community, that we have to do something to preserve that legacy of someone who's that community minded and generosity, that we need to do something. And the train was a natural, here's something that the community can enjoy for years to come.
Now, are we sitting on parts that he owned? Did he own these cars too, or just the steam engines?
So basically, he owned the steam engine, the number 2, and the cars. These are reproductions of the cars that he had at the ranch. These cars, the cars that we have here, were originally, the design was built for the Overfair Railroad up in San Francisco in 1915, 1916 for the Pan American Exposition by Louis McDermott, who built the railroad. And so he had the cars at the ranch because Billy later in the 40s, he befriended Louis McDermott, who had trains that were a little bit larger than his little steam engine. But the cars, he was able to what's called regaging the tracks. That the wheels on those cars were 19-inch, and the locomotive that we have here is 18-inch.
Okay,
So
and 1 inch makes a difference.
Well, 1 inch, 1 inch makes a difference, but there's some mechanical work that you have to do. So what we have here, these are actually reproductions of that design from 1915.
Wow.
And so now the hardware is probably from that time frame, but all the wood has been replaced over the years. And certainly that's one thing that we have to do with the railroad, is there's ongoing maintenance that's required to keep it running.
Now, does Billy Jones have any family left? Anybody still alive?
He had
4 children, 2 died in the war.
Yeah. Unfortunately, his last surviving daughter passed away recently.
Oh.
Yeah. And so I believe there's some grandchildren who live here locally still by.
I hope they come by.
They do. Occasionally we'll be running the train here, and all of a sudden, that was my grandfather's.
And I guess there was no doubt what he was going to name it. Billy Jones Wildcat Railroad.
Wildcat Railroad, yeah. So
it's
just the cats. I mean, it just goes well together. So
okay, he's gone in '68. The community, or was it the family that went to the community and said, "We have these trains. Do you want them?" How did that transpire?
It was kind of a combination of the two, but mainly it was the community. They primarily under a group of people under the leadership of Bill Mason, who
which is the carousel's
which
named
is
after.
the name after that they took an active role of that. Okay, we need to do something to keep the train here in Los Gatos, Sereno, and so there was that effort in '68 to try and okay, let's try and save the railroad. Then 2, the bigger issue is where to put it, because the family at that point was interested in selling off the land for development.
Was Billy a wealthy man?
No, he's wealthy in terms of his love.
Yes, but okay, so the family really didn't have money.
No.
Okay, so you all stepped in.
Typical of the farmers and people of the the Valley of Heart's Delight, they were land rich, cash poor.
Yes.
A nonprofit was formed with $0 and zero equipment.
And
So
why does that make sense? Nonprofit, $0, zero equipment.
Right. So what transpired is, through the course of about a year and a half, that there were different fundraising events. Basically, like your car wash, and back then they would have dances,
Sure.
and social events.
Sure.
And, the train was still running, available to run at Billy's property there. So they had a couple fundraising
Okay.
times whereas that pickle jar was now being used for funding for
Yes.
moving the equipment down to the park.
And it became a gallon
A
can of
and-
paint or
so
something.
They kept having to empty out.
Yeah.
But there was so much community support.
Well, and this place had just started, really. Oak Meadow and Visona, wasn't it all about
yeah,
the same time?
They were just brand new. It's funny, you look at the old pictures and the trees were all just puny.
Oh, and look at it now.
and it's just, so, we're such an integrated part of both Oak Meadow and Visona.
So we've got a nonprofit that does nothing but make sure this train is still running.
Right.
How much money is that every year? A lot?
We do a lot of work with volunteers. The volunteers.
I'm looking at one, right?
Yeah, volunteers, because volunteers are really the lifeblood of our organization.
Of every
Because
organization.
it's something
Yeah.
that, it's the love of what Billy started on 43 and keeping that alive here in the community. And so we do have paid staff. Basically, we have the employees who take tickets
Sure.
and run the snack bar. High school kids. It's a great first-time job for people.
Yeah.
And so we have a management structure to oversee that. But basically, all the funding that we get is through the ticket sales that we have. And so 100% of the ticket sales, other than what we have to pay for salary, goes back into maintaining the operations here.
Which is how Billy would have wanted it.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do you think if Billy were sitting here with us today? What do you think he'd say?
I would think he would be amazed that, hey, here it still is. One, Billy had a love for trains, but he wasn't necessarily the best mechanic. So, there's stories
Well, that's
of
why you're here.
Yeah, there's stories of Billy sometimes just to make sure the train would run on Sundays, that he would kind of put baling wire in a few things just to make sure the train would run for the kids.
Oh my
But
goodness.
We've really here, maintenance and safety is really number one, and I think he would be proud of what we have here for him in terms of his legacy.
Now, I'm getting back to thinking about the steam engine and the cars in his yard, his ranch. What do they do for the water to get the steam engine to run? Doesn't it run on water?
Yeah.
Doesn't it run on water? Tell me it does.
So we have a water tank back here.
But
and
did he have one at his house?
Yes. He had
It's not his.
It's
not
his.
this one, though.
No. This tank has been replaced a couple times.
Yeah.
One time after there was a big earthquake back in '89.
I heard about that.
Yeah, there was a little earthquake.
Yeah.
So we had to replace the water tower
Yeah.
at that. But no, he had a water tower at that point. That is the locomotive principles. It was built in 1905, and so basically the steam engine that we run today is 1905 technology. Yes, there's some bells and whistles, literally, on the locomotive improvements, but the basic technology of boiling water to create steam, to induce it into cylinders with valves and pistons to make that's still 100 and as I said, the basic technology goes back 200 years.
Wow.
In terms of steam engines.
You think Mrs. Jones ever said, Billy, what are you spending our money on? Billy, what are you doing?
Well, it sounds like what my own wife goes through. She says, "Oh, Ken, not another train." The passion for trains is interesting. It just there's a saying that when you get steam in your blood, you'll never let it go. And that's what a few of us get. Once you hear that whistle, once you able to turn a wrench on locomotive, get it to run, and you get that steam in your blood. You just don't want to let it go.
I get
and
it.
so, that's certainly something that, because Billy, once again, he worked for the narrow gauge. When he was still a teenager, he had steam in his blood, and
Yes.
certainly his spouse would recognize that. That's something core to him.
Right.
And so,
Right. You brought a scrapbook along with us. I mean, Billy Jones, Monte Sereno was on the map and in the newspapers all the time because
Right.
of Billy Jones. I mean, his name was synonymous. I mean, look at this is a whole big scrapbook.
Right.
Of
And
old, what's 1970?
1970. So this.
Oh, geez.
So imagine, Lisa, this just represents between 1968 and 1970. So before that, there were countless
Yeah.
articles of, here's a picture of Billy Jones.
Yeah.
There's
there
that
he
water
is.
tower that we're talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
in the background there.
Oh, that is
That-
great.
That it was constantly in the news, not just the local newspapers here, but the larger newspapers like the Mercury News. And
Now,
so-
I don't remember what year Walt Disney died. Was he still alive when?
Walt died in the early 60s. I want to
Okay,
say
so he
64,
probably died before
60.
him. Because
Yes.
I was wondering
Yes.
why Walt Disney wouldn't try and buy all of this stuff.
Well, at one point, Walt did try and buy the equipment, and Billy. The story goes, Billy thought that maybe I'd get more money from Walt, so they kind of disagreed in pricing. I mentioned Lewis McDermott, who built the cars, and okay. Well, Lewis McDermott also built 5 steam locomotives.
Okay.
And at one point, Lewis McDermott lived on Billy's ranch and moved all his equipment to the ranch. And so Billy had all this large equipment at one point, and at one point, Walt Disney was hoping to buy this stuff from Billy Jones, and they couldn't agree on a price. And so that's what encouraged Walt Disney to start building his own railroad down there in Anaheim. And so in the late 60s, or in the mid 60s, Billy had a little financial things, and so he ended up selling some of the equipment in the mid 60s, the McDermott equipment. And that's something that he always
Felt bad
regretted
about. Yeah,
about selling that
yeah.
equipment.
We've
And
all
so-
been there. So
yeah.
I think I'm going to have to take a field trip when we're done. I'm going to drive by Dave's in Winchester.
Right.
Got to see that plaque again.
Yeah.
And whether there are about 8 homes where the ranch used to
Right.
be.
Mm-hmm.
And do those people, I wonder if those people even know what was there before them. I hope
Well,
so.
Hopefully they go
hope
around and
so.
just look at the plaque. It's like, what is this?
Yeah. Well, you really gave us a wonderful story about Billy Jones and the railroad and how we ended up here at Visona and Oak Meadow Park. And I wish I knew him, but I'm so glad we have his legacy.
So we have his legacy, and that's the important thing.
Something-
That this, it's hard to believe that we've been here in the park for 50 years, and just that's
And to think it all
amazing.
started in Monte Sereno. How about that?
right,
I
yeah.
love it. I love it. Thank you, Ken Middlebrook. You have been wonderful.
You're welcome, Lisa.
Come on down and ride this and think of Billy Jones and think of that intersection at Dave's in Winchester where it all started.